The morning sunlight poured through the kitchen window, bathing the room in a warm, golden glow that made everything look softer than it really was. Emma Everett stirred her coffee, watching the reflection of her husband move behind her in the glass. Daniel hummed under his breath, the same tune he'd sung on their wedding day, as he fixed his tie. Every movement was neat, measured, perfect. Just like him, their home, tucked at the end of a quiet suburban street, looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. White walls, polished floors, the faint scent of vanilla candles that never seemed to burn out. Neighbors often said they were the couple everyone wanted to be. Emma used to believe that too. Until lately, Daniel slid his arms around her from behind, his voice low. "Big day today. You'll be home for dinner?" She nodded, smiling softly. Of course. The warmth of his hands on her waist should have comforted her, but instead she felt a strange tension beneath his calm exterior. When she reached for her phone on the counter, it buzzed. A number she didn't recognize flashed across the screen. Unknown. Before she could answer, Daniel's hand shot out. Quick, firm, controlled. "Spam," he said, voice steady but sharp at the edges. "Delete it," Emma hesitated. "It could be work." "Delete it." His tone was final, his smile unwavering. Slowly, she pressed delete. The moment passed in silence. Daniel kissed her cheek as if nothing had happened, grabbed his briefcase and left through the front door. The sound of his car pulling out of the driveway echoed in her chest like a closing door. For a long moment she stood there, phone still in hand, thumb hovering over the recently deleted folder. Curiosity flickered, but fear pressed it down. "He's just protective," she told herself. "He loves me." Outside, the world was ordinary. Kids biked to school. Sprinklers hissed over trimmed lawns. Emma went about her day. Grocery lists, folded laundry, emails. Everything she did was measured, practiced. Perfection had become her routine. But sometimes, when the house grew too quiet, she'd catch herself glancing at the windows, half expecting someone to be watching. That evening, they had dinner on the patio, laughing over grilled salmon and wine. Daniel asked about her day, told stories about work, smiled in all the right places. Anyone watching would see a perfect marriage. But Emma's laughter felt rehearsed, like she was performing a role she no longer understood. As dusk fell, she stepped inside to fetch dessert and noticed something strange. Her phone, still on the counter, now displayed a message notification. It was from the same unknown number. Just 4 words. "He's not who you think." Emma's breath caught. Behind her, the sliding door creaked open. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Daniel's voice was calm, close. She turned, smile practiced. "Yes, everything's fine." He studied her face for a long moment before stepping closer, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. His eyes lingered just a bit too long. That night, as they lay side by side in bed, Emma stared at the ceiling, her heart beating too fast for rest. She wanted to believe it was nothing, just a wrong number, a coincidence. But in the dark, Daniel's hand reached for hers, cold and firm, holding it just a little too tight. And as sleep eluded her, one thought crept into her mind, quiet, relentless, impossible to ignore. What if the message wasn't meant to scare me? What if it was meant to warn me? The silence between them stretched long into the night. And somewhere in that silence, the first crack appeared in their perfect marriage. Morning light spilled across the bedroom, soft and golden, warming the white sheets that smelled faintly of Daniel's cologne. Emma sat up slowly, her head still foggy from another restless night. Daniel had already left for work, or so she thought. His side of the bed was neat, as if he'd barely slept at all. As she fluffed the pillows, something crinkled beneath her hand. Frowning, she reached down and pulled out a folded piece of paper, aged and slightly creased at the corners. Her first thought was that it was one of Daniel's lists. He made them for everything. Grocery runs, weekend projects, daily affirmations taped to the fridge. But when she opened it, her breath hitched. The handwriting wasn't Daniel's. "You can't hide forever." The words were written in heavy strokes, pressed so hard the ink bled through the page. For a moment, Emma just stared, her pulse pounding in her ears. The message felt too personal, too deliberate. "Hide from what?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Her first instinct was to call Daniel, but she hesitated. The memory of his reaction to the text from the unknown number flashed in her mind. the coldness behind his smile. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her robe pocket. By evening, she finally worked up the courage to bring it up. Daniel sat at the dinner table, scrolling through his phone, perfectly calm. The air between them felt heavy, as if both were holding their breath. "I found something," Emma said softly. He looked up, eyebrow raised. "Something?" "Under your pillow." She slid the note across the table. His eyes moved over the words once, then again. His expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. After a moment, he laughed, a low, practiced sound. "It's probably a prank. Maybe one of the neighborhood kids got in somehow." Emma blinked. "Into our bedroom? People do strange things, Em," he said, setting the note down and meeting her gaze. "Don't let it get into your head." But it already had. That night, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Daniel's breathing beside her was steady, slow. She reached for his hand beneath the blanket, searching for reassurance, but his fingers remained still. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under. In her dream, she heard footsteps echoing down the hallway, soft, deliberate, stopping right outside the bedroom door. A shadow loomed against the thin line of light beneath it. She wanted to move, to call out, but her body wouldn't obey. The door creaked open just an inch. Then silence. Emma jolted awake, heart racing. For a second, she couldn't tell if she was still dreaming. The room was dim, the air colder than before. She turned toward Daniel's side of the bed, empty. "Daniel?" she whispered. No answer. She sat up, her pulse pounding. The sheets were still warm where he'd been lying. A faint sound reached her ears, the groan of hinges from downstairs. The front door. Emma climbed out of bed, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. The hallway stretched before her, long and dark, every shadow suddenly unfamiliar. When she reached the staircase, she saw the door standing wide open, the night air spilling in. The rain had stopped. The street outside was still. Her voice shook as she called again, "Daniel?" Silence. Only the rhythmic drip of rainwater from the roof. Then from somewhere near the driveway, a faint sound, like humming. Low, tuneless, hauntingly familiar. Daniel's wedding song. Emma's breath hitched. Her fingers gripped the edge of the doorway, but when she stepped outside, the humming stopped. The driveway was empty. The only movement came from the wind through the trees. She closed the door slowly, locking it twice. Her hands trembled as she backed away. In the reflection of the hallway mirror, her own pale face stared back, and behind her, for the briefest moment, she thought she saw movement, a shadow where none should be. When she turned, there was nothing. Only silence. Emma pressed her back against the wall, clutching the note in her pocket. The words felt heavier now, truer. "You can't hide forever." And for the first time, she wondered, who was it meant for? Her or him? The morning after the open door incident, Emma sat in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. Outside, sunlight painted the garden in soft gold, but she couldn't shake the chill that had settled deep inside her. Daniel hummed as he buttoned his shirt, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. "You barely slept," he noted, tightening his tie before catching his reflection in the microwave door. His tone was light, but his eyes never quite met hers. "Neither did you," she replied. He smiled. "Deadlines. You know how it is," she nodded, though her mind wasn't on his excuses. As soon as he left, she grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts. There was one person she hadn't spoken to in years but suddenly needed to hear. Claire. When the call connected, the familiar voice on the other end trembled slightly. "Emma? Wow, it's been forever." Emma forced a small laugh. "Yeah, I needed someone to talk to." Within an hour, they were seated across from each other in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. Claire hadn't changed much. Same warm eyes, same nervous energy. But there was a tension behind her smile, as if she already knew what this meeting was really about. They started with small talk, old classmates, forgotten memories, until Emma finally said it. "It's about Daniel." Claire's hand froze midway to her cup. "Daniel Hart?" Emma blinked. "Yes. Wait, how do you—" "I dated him," Claire interrupted softly, eyes dropping to the table. "Years before you two met?" Emma's stomach knotted. "You what?" "It was brief," Claire said quickly. "Only a few months. But it was enough. Enough for what? Emma asked, her voice sharper than intended. Claire hesitated. To see what he's capable of. The hum of the cafe seemed to fade. Emma leaned forward, her pulse racing. You're scaring me. What do you mean? Claire's lips trembled. He was charming, perfect. But when I tried to break things off, he changed. He'd show up outside my apartment, call from blocked numbers. Once I found a dead bird on my porch. He said it flew into the wrong window. Emma shook her head slowly. No, Daniel isn't like that anymore. Claire looked up, her eyes glossy. People like him don't change. They just learn how to hide better. The words lodged deep in Emma's chest like splinters. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Claire reached across the table, squeezing her hand. Be careful, Em. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Emma tried to smile, but her throat tightened. He's my husband, Claire. I have to believe. You don't have to believe anything, Claire whispered. You just have to survive it. That night, Emma replayed every word as she sat on the edge of the bed. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of Daniel brushing his teeth. Her phone buzzed. A text from Claire. If you need me, day or night, call. Emma typed out a thank you, hesitated, then deleted it. Instead, she slid the phone into the drawer beside her bed. When Daniel walked in, the air changed. He smiled, soft and practiced, towel around his neck. Long day? Just tired, she murmured. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, slow, deliberate. His hand brushed the nightstand, fingers grazing the drawer where her phone was hidden. You called someone today, he said casually. Her stomach dropped. You were at work, he chuckled. Doesn't mean I can't know things. Emma forced a laugh. Just Claire, an old friend. He said, his gaze holding hers a second too long. Good night, Em. When he turned off the light, his face vanished into shadow. But she could still feel his eyes on her. Emma lay still, her heart pounding against the pillow. She thought of the note, the open door, and Claire's trembling voice. People like him don't change. As the house sank into darkness, she realized something terrifying. The man sleeping beside her didn't need to change. He only needed to know she was still here. And he did. Thunder cracked through the night, rattling the windows like a warning. Rain lashed against the house, heavy and relentless, until the lights flickered once, then died. The silence that followed was sharp and absolute, broken only by the hum of the storm outside. Emma froze at the foot of the stairs, her phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. Daniel? She called softly, no answer. He'd said he was heading to his office, but hours had passed since she last heard the front door open or close. She moved through the hallway, the beam of light sweeping across picture frames, their wedding photo, vacations, birthdays, moments that now felt like props in a story she no longer trusted. The wind howled, and something inside her whispered that tonight she might finally uncover the truth. In the bedroom, she rummaged through drawers for candles, hands trembling. That's when she saw it. Daniel's keyring carelessly left on the nightstand. 4 silver keys she recognized. Front door, car, garage, office. But the fifth was different. Heavy brass, its surface dulled by age and rust. Her pulse quickened. She had seen every corner of this house, or so she thought. The flashlight trembled slightly in her grip as she made her way to the basement door. It had always been sealed shut, Daniel claiming it was just for storage. A mess not worth the trip. But now in the darkness, it called to her. The padlock hung there, thick and old, almost daring her to try. The key slid in smoothly, too easily. For a second, she hesitated, hearing the wind scream outside. Then, with a click, the lock opened. The door groaned as it swung back. A wave of cold air rushed up, smelling faintly of earth. And something else, metallic, damp, wrong. Emma covered her mouth, trying to steady her breathing as she descended the steps one at a time. The wood creaked beneath her feet, and each sound echoed like a heartbeat in the silence. Her flashlight beam caught fragments, boxes stacked in corners, old furniture covered in sheets, and she stopped. Pinned to the far wall were photographs, dozens of them. They were arranged in perfect, meticulous rows. All women, different ages, different faces, some smiling, some looking away. A few were candid shots, taken from a distance through windows across parking lots. Emma's breath hitched. None of them were familiar. None except one photo of her, taken from behind. Her head turned slightly as she watered the garden. Her phone nearly slipped from her hand. "Oh my God," she whispered. In the corner of the basement, she noticed something else, a table. On it lay notebooks, their pages filled with neat, slanted handwriting. She flipped one open. Inside were dates, times, and names, each corresponding to a photograph on the wall. The last entry read, "She's starting to ask questions. Sooner than I planned." The sound of footsteps above made her freeze. Her heart lurched. Daniel was home. She turned off the flashlight instantly, plunging herself into darkness. The floorboards above groaned again, slow, deliberate. "Emma?" His voice echoed down the stairs, calm, too calm. "You down there?" She clutched the phone to her chest, praying he couldn't hear her breathing. "I told you to stay out of the basement," he continued, his tone almost affectionate. "You shouldn't see things that don't concern you." The steps creaked again. He was coming closer. Emma backed up, her shoulder hitting the wall. Panic clawed at her throat. She needed a way out. Then her flashlight flickered back to life for a second, enough for her to see a narrow door in the far corner. She ran for it, the beam cutting through the dark. Behind her, Daniel's voice turned sharp. "Emma, stop!" She threw herself through the small door, slamming it shut behind her. She held her breath, hearing him curse and pound against it. Her light flickered again, and she realized the hidden space was even smaller. Concrete walls, a single narrow window near the ceiling. On the floor was a folded blanket and an old phone. She picked it up, hands shaking. The screen was cracked but lit up when she pressed the button. A message appeared instantly. "If you found this, run." A crash came from the other side of the door. Daniel was breaking through. Emma's breath came in shallow gasps as she looked up at the tiny window above her. Her only escape. Lightning flashed outside, and for a brief second, his shadow filled the doorway. The morning after the storm, the house looked deceptively peaceful. Sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, the smell of coffee drifting in the air. But Emma's hands still trembled as she held the cup, her eyes fixed on the man across from her. Daniel sat there, dressed immaculately as always, flipping through the newspaper like nothing had happened. "Rough night," he said, not looking up. "You should have stayed in bed. Power outages always make you jumpy." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel, I went into the basement." The paper froze mid-turn. Slowly, he folded it, placed it neatly on the table, and met her gaze. His eyes were calm, too calm. "You did what?" "I found the photographs." Her voice shook despite her effort to sound steady. "All those women. And me." He leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was a case file, not his wife. Then, without the slightest change in expression, he said, "You shouldn't have gone down there." Her stomach turned. "What is all that, Daniel? Who are those women?" He exhaled slowly, as though explaining something obvious to a frightened child. "It's therapy work. You know how much trauma I carried after the investigation. Those women, they were victims. I studied their cases, tried to process what I saw." "You weren't supposed to find it yet," Emma blinked. "Investigation? What investigation?" His eyes flickered just for a moment. Then the mask slipped back into place. "From my time working with the department. Before we met," but her mind was already racing. She remembered the stories he'd told when they were first dating. His time as a software consultant. His years in finance, his claim that police work wasn't for him. Never once had he mentioned working on any case, let alone one involving victims. Her breath hitched. "Daniel, you've never been a detective," he smiled, slow, chilling, controlled. "You don't remember everything I've told you, Emma. You mix things up when you're upset. Gaslighting." The word flashed through her head like lightning. The tone, the calmness, the perfect control, all meant to make her question herself. "I saw my picture," she whispered, "on the wall. My face was pinned next to the others." He stood then, walking toward her. Every step echoed in her chest. He crouched down so they were eye to eye and placed a hand on her cheek. "You're tired. You've been under stress. Sometimes we see things that aren't really there." She wanted to push him away, scream, anything, but fear rooted her to the chair. His thumb brushed against her skin with rehearsed tenderness. "You trust me, don't you?" he asked softly. Her voice broke. "Of course. He kissed her forehead, stood, and walked out of the kitchen. The door closed behind him, leaving the house eerily still. Emma sat there long after he left, the taste of dread thick in her mouth. She knew what she'd seen. The metallic smell, the notes, the photos, they were real. But Daniel had twisted her certainty into fog. That night, she waited until his breathing upstairs turned steady and deep. Then she slipped out of bed, clutching a flashlight and the brass key she'd hidden in her robe pocket. The basement door creaked open again, the air colder this time, heavy with the same wrongness. She descended the steps, the beam sweeping across the wall where the photos had hung. Her stomach lurched. Most of the photographs were gone. Only a handful remained, and at the center, a single new one. A candid shot taken from outside the bedroom window. Her eyes half closed, her hand pressed to the glass. Pinned beside it was a slip of paper in Daniel's handwriting. "You said you trust me." The flashlight trembled in her grip. She turned toward the stairs and froze. A shadow fell across the top step. Daniel's voice floated down, quiet, almost tender. "You really shouldn't keep secrets from me, Emma." Rain drizzled against the police station windows, streaking the glass like tears. Emma sat in the cold metal chair, her hands shaking as she clutched the cup of coffee an officer had given her. The station hummed with quiet activity, phones ringing, officers murmuring. But her voice cut through the noise, low and unsteady. "I just need someone to check," she whispered. "My husband, Daniel Everett. There's something wrong with him. I found photos, things that shouldn't exist." The young officer at the desk, name tag H. Collins, gave her a careful, almost sympathetic look. "You said Everett? What's his date of birth?" Emma rattled off the details automatically. Collins typed into the database, the clacking of the keyboard echoing louder than it should have. A few seconds passed, then a few more. His brows furrowed. "Could you repeat the name?" he asked. She did. Slowly this time, he typed again, then stopped. The pause that followed stretched too long, thick with unease. Finally, Collins looked up. "Mrs. Everett, there's no record of anyone by that name at your address. No driver's license, no employment record, no property under that name. Are you sure about the spelling?" Emma's chest tightened. "Of course I'm sure. We've lived there for years. He's my husband." "I'm not saying you're mistaken," the officer said quickly, though the pity in his eyes stung worse than accusation. "But I can't find any record of him existing in the state system. It's like he hesitated, lowering his voice. "It's like he's not real." The world tilted. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. "Check again," she demanded, voice breaking. "Check again, please." He nodded, typed more furiously, the screen flickering. Then he stopped altogether. "I'm sorry." The system just froze. He frowned. "That never happens." Emma stood, tears pooling in her eyes. "You have to come with me. You'll see. He's there. My house, our photos, our life." But even as she said it, something deep in her chest began to crumble. When she stepped back into the rain an hour later, she felt hollow. Her reflection in the car window looked like a stranger. The world she thought she knew, her marriage, her home, her identity, felt like smoke slipping through her fingers. By the time she reached her street, the clouds had swallowed the last light of day. The house loomed in silence, every window dark. She turned the key, stepped inside, and froze. The walls were bare. Where the wedding photos had once hung, faint outlines of frames remained, pale ghosts against the wallpaper. The mantel was empty, the bookshelves half cleared. Even the rug in the living room was gone. Her heart hammered. "Daniel?" The echo of her voice came back hollow. She stumbled toward the study, the drawer where they kept their marriage certificate, their passports. Everything that proved their life together was real. She yanked it open, empty. All that remained was one framed picture on the desk. Their wedding photo, the one everyone loved. She picked it up with trembling hands. Daniel's smile gleamed under the glass, perfect and warm. His hand rested on her shoulder, but something was wrong. In this version, she wasn't smiling. Her mouth was slightly open, eyes unfocused, as if caught mid-protest. And his fingers were gripping her shoulder tighter than she remembered. Her breath caught. She turned the frame over. Scratched into the back of the wood, faint but deliberate, were the words, Erase and begin again. A noise behind her made her spin. The front door was open, swaying slightly. Raindrops patterned the floor. Leading inside and on the entryway table, where her purse had been, sat a small white envelope. No name, no markings. With shaking hands, she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in neat, precise letters. Stop digging. Emma. Some stories don't want to be remembered. Her knees gave out, the letter fluttering from her grasp. Outside, the thunder rolled, and in the distance, faintly, she thought she heard the echo of a camera shutter. The morning after the letter appeared, Emma couldn't bring herself to sleep. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, but her mind refused to quiet. The image of Daniel's smiling face, the note, the empty walls, it all churned in her head like a fever she couldn't break. She sat in her car outside the police station, gripping the steering wheel. Her breath fogged the glass as she tried to muster the courage to walk inside again. But before she could move, something caught her eye. Underneath the passenger seat, a faint glint of metal. She leaned down, reaching with trembling fingers. It was small and rectangular, coated in a thin layer of dust. A voice recorder. The kind Daniel used to take notes during meetings, except he hadn't worked in months. Emma stared at it, her pulse roaring in her ears. The play button seemed to stare back at her, daring her. She pressed it. Static hissed for a few seconds. Then his voice, smooth, calm, almost tender, filled the confined space of the car. You don't understand. This isn't cruelty. It's mercy, Emma froze. The voice was Daniel's, unmistakably. But it wasn't the version of him she knew. It was lower, more deliberate, carrying a quiet madness that chilled her blood. A faint sound echoed behind him, muffled sobbing. Please, a woman's voice whimpered. Please stop. Emma's heart stuttered. It's almost done, Daniel whispered. She won't suffer like the others. I promise, a metallic clang. A soft cry. Then silence, except for Daniel's slow, steady breathing. Emma's thumb hovered over the pause button, but she couldn't bring herself to stop it. She sat frozen, every nerve screaming as the recording continued. You'll forgive me one day, he murmured. You always do. You always come back. Then another sound, faint but clear, a woman's voice again, crying, pleading, her voice Emma's. The recorder slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the passenger seat. The sound of her own sobs, trapped in the tiny machine, filled the car, merging with the storm outside. She clamped her hands over her mouth, gasping. Her memories flashed, fragmented moments she'd dismissed as dreams. The dark room, Daniel's shadow hovering above her. The feeling of waking with bruises she couldn't explain. She had told herself they were night terrors, that she was imagining things, but now, hearing herself beg in that recording, she knew it was real. Emma grabbed the recorder, rewinding frantically. She needed to hear everything, to understand what had happened. Another click, more static. Then Daniel again, softer, gentler. She'll be asleep soon. When she wakes up, she won't remember. I'll tell her it was just another nightmare. She always believes me. Her stomach turned. Her hands trembled so violently the device nearly slipped again. The air in the car thickened, like even the oxygen had turned against her. She shoved open the door, stumbling into the rain. The world felt tilted, unreal, like she'd stepped outside of time. Leaning against the car, she whispered, "What did you do to me, Daniel?" Thunder rolled overhead. She looked down at the recorder still playing, Daniel's voice bleeding through the static one last time. If she ever finds this, then it's already too late. The device clicked off. Emma stared at it, her mind spinning. Was he watching her? Had he planned this moment, this discovery? She scanned the street. Every parked car, every window, every rustling curtain seemed to hide his gaze. In a burst of panic, she ran back to the house, slamming the door behind her. She dropped to her knees, pulling open every drawer, every cabinet, searching for something, anything, that could make sense of it all. Then she saw it, taped beneath the kitchen counter. Another recorder, her breath caught. Slowly, she peeled it free. Her reflection stared back at her from the stainless steel of the fridge. Pale, terrified, hollow, she pressed play. And this time, there was no mistaking what she heard, her voice again. But she wasn't crying. She was whispering, "If anyone finds this, please, Don't believe what he tells you. My name isn't Emma Everett. The message cut off abruptly. Her fingers went numb. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy, deliberate, and filled with something far worse than fear. Because for the first time, Emma began to wonder if she was ever really his wife at all. The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds, painting pale stripes across Emma's face as she sat hunched at the edge of the bed, clutching her phone. The message had come from Claire at dawn, a single image, no words. It was an old photograph, grainy and tinted yellow with age. Daniel stood in the center, younger but unmistakably him. The same eyes, the same composed posture. Only this time, his arm was wrapped tightly around another woman. A wedding ring gleamed on his left hand. Emma's breath caught. Her mind tried to find reason, an explanation. Maybe it was a cousin, a family friend, some forgotten relative. But when she turned the image over, she saw the date scrawled in faded ink. March 12, 2008. 10 years before she met him. Beneath it, 2 words written in a shaky hand. Our beginning. Her phone buzzed again. A second message. Claire's text. We need to talk, not here. He's not who you think. Emma stared at the words until they blurred. Her hands trembled as she typed back, "Where are you?" But before a reply could come, the screen went dark. Dead battery. By the time Daniel returned home that evening, the air in the house had shifted. The once comforting silence now throbbed with dread. He entered the kitchen carrying groceries, whistling softly. "You didn't answer your phone," he said without looking at her. Emma watched him from the doorway, the photograph hidden behind her back. "It died," she said quietly. He set the bag down, turned to her, smiling that effortless smile that used to calm her. "Everything okay?" Her throat tightened. "Who is she, Daniel?" He paused mid-step. "Who?" She held up the photo, her voice breaking. "The woman in this picture." For a moment he didn't speak. His expression didn't even flicker. Just that same unnerving stillness, like a man listening to a sound only he could hear. Then he chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You shouldn't go digging in things that don't belong to you, Emma." "Who is she?" she demanded, louder this time. He met her eyes, calm, cold. "She was my wife." The words landed like a blade between them. Emma stepped back, her breath catching. "Was?" He nodded slowly, walking closer. "You were supposed to replace her." His tone was almost tender, almost admiring. "You were perfect." Same hair, same smile, same laugh. "You even say my name the way she did." Emma's stomach twisted. "Replace her?" she whispered. He smiled wider now, eyes dark. "Don't you see? I fixed what was broken. You were meant to make it right." Her heart pounded. She could feel the room closing in around her, the shadows stretching, the walls shrinking. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. That night she didn't sleep. Every sound made her flinch. The creak of the stairs, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint movement of air under the door. She kept the photograph beneath her pillow, as if proof could protect her. By morning, the phone rang. The sound jolted her upright. "Emma Hart?" the voice asked. "Official? Clipped?" "This is Detective Lewis. Are you acquainted with Claire Donovan?" Emma froze. "Yes, why?" A pause. Then quietly, "She was found this morning in her apartment." Her pulse stopped. "Found?" "She's gone," the detective said. "We're treating it as suspicious." "There was no forced entry." Emma's voice cracked. No, that's not possible. She just sent me a photo." Her words dissolved into sobs. The detective's voice softened. "We'd like you to come in and answer a few questions." She hung up without responding. The world tilted. Her knees gave out as she slid down the wall, clutching the photo until her knuckles went white. Through the haze of panic, she realized something. The image had changed. The back of it, once blank except for the date, now had new writing, fresh black ink that hadn't been there before. It read, "She asked too many questions." Her breath hitched. She turned toward the hallway. The faint sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs. Daniel was awake, and he was humming the same soft tune he had the night before. Emma didn't wait. She grabbed her coat, the photograph, and bolted through the back door, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Behind her, the door creaked open. "Emma," Daniel called gently, "you don't have to run. We're almost perfect again. The wind howled through the trees as she fled into the dark, clutching the proof of a marriage built on lies, and the ghost of the woman she had unknowingly replaced. Rain pounded against the windows that night, washing the world in streaks of gray. Emma sat at the edge of the bed, her suitcase half-zipped, her breath shallow. Every creak of the old house made her flinch. The photograph, now wrinkled and water-stained, rested in her trembling hand. She had written a note, brief, desperate. If anything happens to me, it was him. But before she could decide where to hide it, she heard the slow, measured sound of footsteps on the stairs. Daniel's voice floated through the hall, calm and familiar. "Emma, why are you awake?" Her heart skipped. She shoved the note into the pocket of her coat and forced her voice to steady. "Couldn't sleep?" "The storm." He lingered at the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light. "You should rest." "You've been off lately." Off, the word stung. He said it with such convincing tenderness that for a heartbeat she almost believed him. Almost. But then she saw it. The faint red mark on his wrist, shaped like a crescent moon. Claire's mark, her fingernails. She looked away quickly, pretending not to notice. "I'll try," she whispered. When he finally turned and disappeared down the hall, Emma's body trembled uncontrollably. She waited until the clock struck 2 a.m., then slipped from bed, shoes in hand. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the storm's distant growl. Each step toward the front door felt heavier than the last. She paused only once, in front of the mirror. The reflection that stared back was not the woman she remembered, pale, hollow-eyed, haunted. "You can't hide forever." The note under his pillow, the words came rushing back like an omen. She opened the door. The wind hit her face like a slap, and rain soaked her hair within seconds. She didn't care. She ran barefoot down the street, suitcase forgotten, her lungs burning with every breath. Behind her, a faint light flickered on upstairs. From the window, Daniel stood motionless, watching her vanish into the storm. By sunrise, the police were knocking at his door. 2 detectives, calm but firm. "Mr. Everett, when was the last time you saw your wife?" Daniel leaned against the frame, still wearing his robe. His tone was perfectly measured, almost bored. "Last night. She's been struggling lately. Anxiety, paranoia. Tried to get her help." The detectives exchanged a glance. "We received reports from neighbors," one said. "They heard shouting." He smiled faintly. "Every couple argues, detective." "But Emma..." He hesitated, lowering his eyes as if choosing the most sorrowful expression. "She's fragile. She's been imagining things. Seeing threats that aren't there." They nodded, taking notes. To them, he looked like a grieving husband. Articulate, cooperative, rational. Outside, search teams were already fanning out through the drenched streets. That's when they found it. A security camera mounted above a closed cafe, its red light blinking faintly through the rain. The footage was short, grainy, but unmistakable. Emma, barefoot, soaked, sprinting down the street. Her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wide with terror. She kept looking over her shoulder as though someone were following. Then she vanished into darkness. No car, no witnesses, no trace. The lead detective replayed the footage 3 times. Each time she paused at the same frame, the exact moment Emma looked back. For a split second, another shape appeared in the reflection of a rain puddle behind her. A figure, tall, dark, motionless. When she slowed it down, the shape's outline sharpened. A man in a long coat, watching. But the street records showed no one else there. Back at the house, Daniel brewed coffee. The detective's car pulled away, tires splashing through puddles. He stood by the kitchen window, smiling faintly as the wind carried the sound of sirens into the distance. On the counter beside him lay a single photograph, Emma's. Her face smiling, framed perfectly under glass. He turned it over, uncapped a pen and wrote on the back in small, deliberate letters. She finally ran, just like the others. Then with surgical precision, he slid the photo into a manila folder labeled Project Rebirth. In the corner of the folder were 2 empty spaces for 2 more photos yet to be filled. 2 weeks after Emma Everett vanished into the storm, a fisherman spotted something glinting beneath the gray surface of Hollow Lake. At first, he thought it was debris from the recent flood, until the light hit chrome. Within hours, police divers were combing the water, and by noon they found it. Emma's car, nose down in the mud, headlights still faintly glowing like eyes refusing to close. The news spread fast. Missing woman's car found in Hollow Lake. Every outlet carried her picture, the same smiling portrait from her wedding day, the one Daniel himself had provided. At sunset, Daniel stood on the lakeshore surrounded by cameras, holding her photo against his chest. His voice cracked as he addressed the crowd. Emma was the light of my life. Wherever she is, I just pray she's at peace. And I forgive whoever did this. The words trembled with emotion. He even wiped away tears, perfectly timed for the flashing cameras. The audience wept with him, but Detective Lydia Torres, standing in the back, didn't. She had studied too many liars to be moved by tears. What caught her attention wasn't his trembling voice, it was his hand. The same hand that held Emma's car keys. Lydia's eyes narrowed. The divers had already confirmed that the keys weren't recovered from the car. And yet there they were, glinting from between Daniel's fingers, attached to the same monogrammed keychain Emma's sister had described. When the vigil ended, Lydia approached him, flashing her badge gently so as not to attract attention. "Mr. Everett, I'm sorry for your loss. May I ask where you found those keys?" Daniel blinked, feigning confusion, then smiled faintly. "Oh, these? They were returned to me by the police earlier. Said they found them near the shore." Lydia's expression didn't change. "Strange," she said softly. "The team hasn't finished their sweep yet." For just a moment, his gaze faltered, the faintest crack in his performance. Then it was gone. "You must be mistaken, Detective. I've had them since yesterday." Lydia nodded politely but made a note in her book. Yesterday he had no keys. Back at the station, she reviewed the dive footage frame by frame. The murky green water revealed fragments, a purse, a shoe, a strand of hair tangled in the steering wheel. The driver's door had been locked from the outside. It wasn't a crash. It was a burial. When she ran Daniel's name through the national database again, something new appeared. A sealed record under another identity. David Ellison, a man reported dead 15 years earlier in another state. Same date of birth. Same scar on the left hand. Lydia's pulse quickened. She pulled the files from cold storage. The case of Lena Harrow, a missing woman found in a drained quarry. Her husband, David Ellison, had been the prime suspect. He'd vanished before charges could be filed. The case went cold. Now he was standing in her town, smiling on camera, weeping for his missing wife. The next morning, Lydia returned to the Everett home with a search warrant. Daniel met her at the door, his face a perfect mask of sorrow. "Detective Torres," he said softly. "I was just praying. For closure," she met his eyes. "You might get it sooner than you think." He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Of course. Anything to help." The officers fanned out, one to the bedroom, another to the garage. Lydia moved toward the study. The air smelled faintly of cologne and disinfectant. On the desk sat a single framed photograph of Emma and Daniel. But when she lifted it, something fluttered to the floor. A piece of paper. A receipt for a storage unit rented under the name D. Ellison. Her heartbeat thundered. She looked toward Daniel, who was standing in the doorway watching her. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Be careful what you look for, Detective," he said quietly. "Sometimes you find it." That night, Lydia and her team drove out to the storage facility. The rain returned, steady and cold. Inside Unit 39B, the air was damp and stale. Flashlights swept across boxes, old furniture, and, at the back, a small wooden chest. Lydia knelt, pried it open, and froze. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Smiling women, all with Daniel, all with the same ring glinting on their fingers. And in the center, Emma. The most recent photo was dated 2 days before she disappeared. Outside, thunder rolled across the lake. Back at home, Daniel sat in the dark, holding his phone to his ear. "She's getting close," he whispered to someone on the other end. "Do it tonight?" The basement door groaned as Detective Lydia Torres pushed it open. The faint stench of mold and metal wafted upward. The same metallic, damp wrong odor described in Emma's initial report, now hauntingly real. She switched on her flashlight. The beam cut through the dark like a blade, revealing walls plastered with photographs. neatly arranged in grids. But this time, there was more. Shelves lined the walls, row after row of old VHS tapes, each labeled in clean, deliberate handwriting. Her heart sank as she read the names. Lena 1, Lena 2, final. Then Marie 1, final. Then her hand froze. Emma 1, Emma 2, final. The last one was dated a week before the lake discovery. Lydia felt her throat tighten. She called to her partner upstairs. "Get the evidence kit down here. Now." The static-filled hum of an old CRT monitor came to life in the corner, a relic wired to a VCR. Lydia slipped on gloves and pressed play. The screen flickered. The recording began. Emma sat tied to a chair, hands bound with duct tape, hair matted, eyes glassy with exhaustion. Her voice, barely a whisper, filled the room. "He won't stop until someone tells the truth." The camera panned, jerky, unsteady, and caught a shadow moving behind her. A familiar tune hummed softly, almost tenderly, through the static. Lydia's breath caught. It was Canon in D, the same melody from the wedding video Daniel had shown during the vigil. "He always hums that," Emma murmured in the recording, eyes darting toward the camera. "When he's deciding," her voice broke. The screen went black for several seconds before flickering back. Now the frame showed Daniel standing over her, half in shadow, his voice calm, measured. "You were supposed to make me better, Emma, but you kept asking questions." Emma's lips trembled as she whispered, "Please, Daniel, you don't have to—" "Shh," he interrupted, placing a finger to her lips. "You said you loved me. Love means not hiding things." The sound that followed wasn't a scream, it was silence. Then the same wedding tune hummed lower, slower, more deliberate. Lydia's hand shook as she hit pause. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the still image on the screen. Daniel's half-smile. Emma's tears frozen in light. The walls around her seemed to close in. The tapes weren't trophies. They were confessions. She moved deeper into the basement, past the shelves until she reached a metal door half hidden behind an old cabinet. It was padlocked. Lydia pried it open with a crowbar. The hinges screamed. Inside was a smaller room, bare except for a single chair, a ring light, and a camera on a tripod. The floor was stained in irregular circles. The recording room. In the corner, she found a box of blank labels and rolls of fresh tape. On the wall, written in black marker, were the words, "Truth lives on tape." Her breath caught. One empty tape lay ready in the VCR, already labeled, Torres 1. A chill ran through her chest. He had planned for her. She backed away slowly, radio trembling in her hand. "Dispatch, this is Detective Torres. I need backup at 117 Willow Creek, immediate," Static answered. Then in a whisper, "You're too late, Lydia." Her eyes darted toward the monitor. The screen had come back to life, a live feed from another camera. The timestamp showed now. The image was of her, standing in that very room, flashlight in hand. And behind her, in the shadows, a figure moved. She spun around. The flashlight beam swept across the concrete, catching nothing but dust. Her pulse hammered. "He's in here," she hissed into the radio. "He's watching me." Outside, thunder cracked. The power flickered. For a heartbeat, everything went black. When the lights returned, the live feed showed an empty chair. And on the table where the tapes once sat, there was now a single new cassette. Torres Year Final. Lydia stumbled toward the stairs, breath ragged. The sound of humming drifted up from below. Canon in D again, slower this time. She pushed through the basement door, locking it behind her. Her hands trembled as she dialed the precinct. "This isn't over," she whispered. "He's turning it into a story." And somewhere in the dark, Daniel smiled, pressing record. The documentary opens with the sound of rain, soft, persistent, like the echo of something unfinished. Detective Lydia Torres's voice overlays the footage, calm yet weighted with exhaustion. "It's been 8 months since the case of Daniel Everett, or whatever his real name was, shook our quiet town. What you're about to hear was never meant for the public. It's the final message from Emma Everett, recorded moments before her death." The screen fades to black. Then a faint hiss. A phone recording begins. "If you see this," Emma's trembling voice whispers, "please, don't believe the smile." The sound of heavy breathing follows, uneven. Frightened, Then the faint hum of a familiar tune in the background. Canon in D cut to a montage of police photos. The basement, the tapes, the damp walls marked with names. A narrator describes how Daniel's entire identity had been fabricated. Multiple marriages under false names, all ending the same way. Missing wives, staged accidents, grief performances before sympathetic cameras. Detective Torres sits for her on-screen interview. The lighting is dim, her expression hardened by what she's seen. He wasn't killing out of rage, she explains softly. He was preserving control. Every woman who left him became a threat to his story. She pauses, staring off camera. He needed to be the perfect husband. That's what terrified him. Imperfection. The film cuts to clips of Daniel from public appearances, smiling at charity events, speaking tenderly about Emma's kindness, placing a hand over his heart as reporters cry beside him. But then, a still frame freezes. His smile lingers a second too long. The corners of his lips twitch, and his eyes shift towards something off camera. Cold, aware. The documentary zooms in on that frozen image as Lydia's narration continues. Even after his arrest, Daniel refused to confess. But we found something. One final tape hidden behind the insulation in his basement wall. Static fills the speakers again. The tape begins to play, Daniel's voice calm and distant. You wanted the truth, didn't you? Here it is, they all begged for honesty. But love isn't honesty. Love is obedience. The sound of a chair scraping against concrete echoes faintly. Emma was different, he continues. She saw me. I didn't want to hurt her. Until she stopped believing in me. A pause, then a chuckle, low, restrained. Now she'll never stop believing. The tape ends. Lydia's eyes glisten in the interview room. He recorded everything, even his own lies. The documentary transitions to footage of Emma's old home, now abandoned, windows boarded, mailbox stuffed with uncollected letters. The camera drifts through the front yard where the grass has overgrown. A single white rose rests on the porch steps, left by an unknown hand. Emma's voice returns, faint, fragile, from that last voicemail. He said the camera never lies. But it does. It hides what's just outside the frame. A slow pan moves across their wedding photo. Daniel in a black suit, Emma radiant in white. For a fleeting second, the viewer notices something almost invisible. In the reflection of the glass behind them, the shape of a camera lens, watching. The narration fades into silence. In the final segment, Detective Torres visits the lake where Emma's car was found. The sky is gray, the water still. She lays a single tape labeled Emma Final beside the shoreline. I still hear her voice, she murmurs. She tried to warn us, not just about him, but about how love can blind us to the truth. Her eyes lift toward the horizon. The wind rustles the reeds. And maybe, she says, voice breaking slightly, that's what monsters count on. The screen fades to black. Then the faint sound of static. The end credits roll. Black background. White text over the quiet hum of Canon in D. But halfway through, the music cuts, a final clip interrupts raw, shaky footage from a news interview filmed months earlier. Daniel sits in front of reporters, face composed, eyes glistening. I forgive whoever did this to her, he says softly. Emma was everything to me. The camera zooms in closer. For a split second, so brief it's almost imperceptible. His lips curl into a faint, knowing grin, and before the audience can process it, the screen cuts to black. A single line fades in, stark white against the void. Perfection isn't love. It's silence, then static,